In 1968, we went to the movies, and we saw 2001, and we saw a computer that we could talk to and talk to us. Of course, it was the size of a warehouse, and nobody anticipated that we'd have something like Siri. Then in 1981, IBM introduced its first personal computer. And with that, we began communicating using voice, touch, and gesture. We screamed at our computers, we banged at them, and we made obscene gestures. The only problem is they didn't answer back. Now, we've got a group of folks here this morning who've made the machines actually respond to voice, touch, gesture, and eye tracking as well. I've forgotten what the name of the panel actually is. I just call it Just Act Naturally. Because after all, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about interfacing with our technology, not just computers, but all of our technologies, using the things that we use to interface with people, with each other. And now that we have these implementations, we've got a great panel for you. And you'll pardon me while I pull out the magnifying glass, because it's been one of those days. We're going to start with Dan Hubble from Microsoft, talking about Windows 8 and the new accessibility features in Windows 8. I will tell you that in the last few days, I've made extensive use of those. They work. Dan is the marketing manager for accessibility at Microsoft. He's been with them for 12 years. He also has the interesting job. He is currently the president of the board for the Assistive Technology Industry Association. So Dan and certainly the rest of the folks at Microsoft have taken a broad view of what accessibility means. Our second panelist is Peter Mahoney. Peter is general manager and vice president for Nuance, general manager for Dragon. When Peter speaks, machines listen. At least he'd like to believe that. I'm not going to get into everything he's accomplished, but the fact that we now use his company's products on a regular basis, I'm sure almost every one of you now walks into a doctor's office, and when the doctor finishes up, he dictates what the visit was all about, drops stuff into forms, and we all know most of that engine is Nuance. Siri is Nuance. Our third panelist is Carl Korobkin. Carl is the vice president of OEM solutions for Tobii Technology. Tobii is not a household name. If you know anything, though, about eye research, Tobii is perhaps the major player in devices that track eyes for medical reasons. And now Tobii is making a strong move into the consumer area where you'll be able to basically control your computer using his device. And our final panelist this morning is Quindla, from Oblong Industries. Oblong Industries, again, is not exactly a household name, but how many of you saw the movie Minority Report with those spectacular gestures? Quinn's company designed those. They are now implementing those same gestures on a broader basis for commercial development with lots and lots of big-name clients, and he's going to take us through sort of some fun stuff. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring in like 7 big-screen TVs and have him just sort of wish things around, but we'll do the best we can. So I'd like to get started with the man from Microsoft, Dan Hubble. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here with the Silver Summit. Like Gary said, my name is Dan Hubble. I'm going to talk quickly about, each of us is taking sort of a different take on what natural user interface is for the computer. As Gary sort of pointed out, we're sort of in this new world of how we interact with technology. And so what I'm going to focus on today is touch, and how touch is really going to reimagine the way that we interact with our technology. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up, I have here on my table my lovely Surface tablet, and I'm going to turn on the monitor, and hopefully it's going to work. If it flashes a few times, and this worked seamlessly during tech rehearsal. Run number 1. I keep seeing it flash. There we go. So the first thing that I'm going to, oh, there it disappeared again. There we go. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about related to touch is how we are, why is this? It's honestly not my fault.
Dan, does this mean you don't have the touch?
Cute, Gary, cute. All right. We have, wait, I was connected to number 2 earlier, and I don't know if it has a different, can we just try that real quick?
See, I told all these guys, no slides, you had to do this live. And as the late Steve Jobs has discovered a few times, that's not always necessarily the best course of action.
Is it going to stay? Why is it not? It's this, I'm unfortunately using up my time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just by talking about, as I'm trying to get this to stay up, and I'm not touching it. It does not like what I'm doing. I have another.
So Dan,
well,
we've seen the image. Maybe you can start.
Okay. Well, what I want to talk about is, gosh, it's not even going to let me. Can we click that off and then back? I'm going to do this. We're going to go old school, folks. And I know, I apologize, we don't have the projected view of this, but I'm not going to horse around with it anymore. So I've got my Surface tablet, which, by the way, would have worked perfectly if I dropped it, if you've seen the videos of that being done. So the touch interface, what really touch is doing is it's reinventing how we do old tasks in new ways. The first way I'm going to start to talk about is how many folks in here have ever either forgotten their password or had a hard time typing it because they have to put in 16 million different special characters and all those things. I have, right? I'm not even that Silver's demographic, and I have trouble with that from time to time. So what touch has enabled us to do is rethink what it means for a password to be a password, right? A password is really just some piece of information that only we know that allows us to get into our information. So what we've done with Windows 8 is we've actually created this concept of a picture password. Here's a familiar photograph that I took in Burano, Italy, when I was on vacation with my wife a few years ago. This is something that's familiar to me. I know what it is. And what I've done is I've identified 3 gestures that I make on this photograph that will then unlock my computer. Without touch, this isn't possible. I don't have to remember all of my characters and my numbers. I don't have to have the dexterity to actually type that password. So in this case, I'm actually going to make a simple swipe from this window to this window. I'm going to tap on the light and tap on the window, and this is actually going to unlock my desktop. So touch has given us the ability to change the way people who might have dexterity issues, might even have vision issues or cognitive issues related to entering passwords, giving them a new way to interact with their computer. Now, I know this is going to be hard to see, but what I want to talk about briefly is just how touch is enabling us to do new things, like exploring through our photographs on in our albums. Most of us are familiar doing this on our smartphones to some extent. I can do pinch and zoom and bring this in. I'm going to go back to my Italy photographs. I can zoom through here. I can do the same thing and actually view my entire catalog of pictures here. And when I click on one that, let's say I want to do something with, here's a lovely picture of my wife in, I believe that's, I don't know, one of the fountains in various places in Italy. I, of course, can zoom and bring that in. But I can also edit with this. I can come in here and I want to crop, and let's say I just want to get the fountain. Not that I don't love my wife, but let's say I just wanted the picture of the fountain. I can move that with my fingers. I can then hit accept this, and it's going to edit my photograph. What this has done is it's taken the complexity out of the mouse interface, which is cognitively you're moving something that's in a different place than what you're trying to change. And for a lot of people, that when I push forward, I'm moving something up on the screen, or when I'm moving backward, I'm moving something down on the screen, can be very, very disjointed and, quite frankly, confusing, because moving here, it's a lot easier to actually just touch your screen. So one of the things that we talk a lot about with seniors at Microsoft is how do we actually create and make it easier for folks to get quickly to the things that they need to do. And so when we talk a lot about seniors, we talk about surfing the internet and collecting information, communicating with friends and family, and then doing some sort of exercise, whether that be physical exercise with devices like Kinect or playing games, which is more mental exercise. So if you take that second one, which is connecting with friends and family, one of the biggest complexities that we have is the different tools that we use to communicate on the PC. Touch and the touch interface, as we found in a project that we did in New York, actually made, I'm going to tell you a story about a gentleman named Milton. He was 88 years old, had never used a computer before. We brought a touchscreen computer into his home, connected him with a local senior center, and on his desktop we put a series of icons of people that he could connect with. It was his daughter, it was his son, it was a couple of his grandkids that he wanted to be able to talk to. And very simply, I can come down here. I have a whole section of people that are noted on my computer, and if this was large, you would obviously be able to see this much more clearly. But when I touch on my wife, it opens her contact card, and instead of having to fumble through, touch gives me the ability to have a big square icon with a photograph that I recognize as my wife. It then brings me down to a number of large icons that I can click on in all the various ways that I can communicate with her. Before touch, this was really hard to implement. It's given us the ability to really think about how we are personally interacting with our screens and with the content, and in this case, the people that we want to connect with. So I know that we used a little bit of time in the beginning. I'm certainly going to be around to answer questions later, but please play around with touch. I'll leave you with this. I have a lot of people that are skeptical about the idea of using touch on a laptop. They're used to it on their phone. A tablet somewhat makes sense. If you haven't had a chance, I know there will be a number of people around the show floor over the course of the week that have touchscreen laptops. Sit down and try it. Once you use it, you will find yourself sitting down at a non-touchscreen laptop touching the screen. It really is truly an intuitive and natural way that we all interact with the world around us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I just got my first touchscreen laptop with Windows 8 the other day, and I'd been using a touchscreen on my desktop for a while, and in a matter of minutes, I was finding that I could fly through stuff. There are other things in Microsoft accessibility that, but the touch interface, I think, is really nice. For those of you who've looked at some of the big screen touch, like the 27 inches from Asus and Lenovo, it means that you can get down there with your grandkids, you can do drawings, you can annotate photographs, and it makes it a far more collegial and family-oriented experience and just plain fun. One of the other things that's fun sometimes is when I talk to my GPS and it turns around and goes, "That's not my database." But Peter Mahoney says, don't blame us. We understood you, but they didn't have the data behind it. Voice recognition is incredibly complex. And the only reason why we've got it today and didn't have it before is because of the massive, massive increases in processing power and also the advent of the cloud. And I'm going to let Peter sort of bring us up to date with some new stuff that Nuance is up to. And do I need to keep filling, Peter? Or are you about ready?
30 more seconds.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
make sure we're logged on and working here.
All right. How many of you have tried Siri or another voice interface? All right. How many of you have found consistently good results? From Siri? Yeah. Okay. You know, I was out hiking and I was crossing over a river, and I turned around and I said, "Siri, can you tell me the name of the water that's running under me?" And Siri said, "Would you like me to do a web search for the water that's running under me?" And not quite what I had in mind. But Peter's getting this stuff down, and there are obviously areas where voice interfaces have been very, very successful. Navigation is one, and the doctor's office is another. And your doctors who are so frustrated by all of the new rules and regulations are finding that the voice engines are one of the few things that have actually made their lives easier. Peter?
Great. Well, thanks, Gary, and thank you, everyone, for joining. So at Nuance, we make lots of different kinds of technologies that help people interact more naturally with devices. Everything from, Gary mentioned, the medical environment, where about half of our business comes from people interacting, doctors interacting with medical information systems. Of course, our consumer products like Dragon Naturally Speaking. And then we're embedded in lots of different kinds of technologies. Basically, if you can talk to it, or it talks to you and it's not human, it's probably driven by our technology. I wanted to give you a brief view of some of the current state of the art. This is Dragon Naturally Speaking version 12 that you'll see on the screen here, just to set some context about what voice does these days. So let's start with a quick demo. Open Microsoft Word. Set the font size to 18 points. This is a brief demonstration of Dragon Naturally Speaking version 12, period. As you can see, comma, I can dictate into my computer and it will accurately transcribe my voice into text on the screen, dash, right before your very eyes, exclamation point. Bold, your very eyes. New paragraph. Send an email to Peter Mahoney, showing off Dragon Naturally Speaking version 12. Body field. Go to body. Hi, Peter, comma, new paragraph. I just wanted to show you some of the great new capabilities in Dragon Naturally Speaking version 12, period. As you can see, comma, it is extremely accurate and fast, period. This is just table stakes in voice recognition capability these days, dash, it just plain has to work, period, new paragraph. Click send. Search the web for wedding chapels in Las Vegas. Click search. Stop listening. So I wanted to show you a quick demonstration of some of the capabilities. Thank you. To sort of set the context for where voice is going, Dragon Naturally Speaking is a pretty popular application these days. We actually have it, we have many, many seniors who use Dragon for lots of different reasons. One is that for a lot of people who are of a certain demographic, they didn't grow up typing. Some people, if you look at the origins of Dragon around the accessibility applications, a lot of people in the accessibility world will say that most people are either disabled or not disabled yet. Eventually our dexterity starts to slow down. When you reach a certain age, I know for me, my arms are not long enough to read my iPhone anymore, so I had to boost up the fonts. So the ability to interact with your voice, use text-to-speech to read things back to the screen is a very important capability for people these days. One of the things that you'll see in voice is Dragon, of course, is used very much for people for personal productivity, for making their computers easy to use. We have a lot of seniors who actually use Dragon to transcribe audio. We have lots of people who are sitting down with the older generation, recording with the digital recorder their story, and then using Dragon to transcribe it. Just to give you a quick view, the way it works, if you record an audio file from someone and take that audio file and just kind of drop it on Dragon, Dragon will transcribe it for you. So in this case, we use this in a lot of cases for things like caseworkers who are dictating files for their patients on the fly, as an example. What you'll see coming up next, we at the last CES announced an interesting relationship with Intel, where we're going to start to build voice more natively into the upcoming Ultrabooks. In fact, the new Dell XPS 13 Ultrabook now comes with a version of Dragon built in called Dragon Assistant. And what's notable about that is instead of having to actually interact and click a button or say a command, click a button to turn on a microphone, you can just say, "Hello, Dragon." It's always listening because of the advances in sensor technology and processing power that's available. It's always listening, so it'll say, "What can I do for you?" And you can search the web, you can tweet, you can interact with your computer in a very different way. So we think that voice is an incredibly important part of the way that people from every generation will interact with technology these days. We see it increasingly integrated with other kinds of technology that I think you're going to hear about from some folks, including gesture, eye tracking, et cetera, as a component of the natural way that people interact with technology.
Peter, thank you. Carl, you want to get plugged in? See, I don't know about you guys, but the notion of having my computer listening to me all the time without my asking about it, I'm going, I'm not sure that I like that so much. There's downsides to all this stuff. How many of you are familiar with eye tracking?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Okay.
So a fair number. Carl,
Yep.
You ready to jump in?
I am.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, so as Gary mentioned, at Tobii, we are the global leader in eye tracking. Eye tracking actually is something that's in some sense difficult to describe because it's so natural. And it's not something that, it's really something you just have to try. And actually I invite all of you to come to our booth down at the South Hall to see some of our demos. Basically what eye tracking is, we put sensors near the bottom of the screen that do just that. They track your eyes. And why is that important? Well, actually, if you think about it, the computer mouse was invented 40 years ago. And what does the mouse do? The mouse actually is a device, a mechanical device that allows you to, in a mechanical way, affirm what you're looking at on the screen. So you do a lot of this. You go to a map, you do a lot of panning and scrolling. You work in a productivity application, you're doing a lot of clicking, moving, and so forth. It turns out with eye tracking is that we are able to capture what you're already doing with your eyes in terms of X, Y, and Z, and effectively really can get rid of the mouse. Although we don't claim that we're going to make the mouse obsolete tomorrow, but actually if you try some of our demos, Tobii Gaze for Windows 8, you realize that you're really not using the mouse anymore. It really now is immersing you in a multimodal, multi-sensor world where your eyes, what you're doing on the screen in terms of X, Y, what you're pointing at, what you're zooming at, what you're selecting, is done automatically. And then that in concert with voice, with gesture, really creates a remarkable experience for people who have disabilities, all the way down to just everybody, the general consumer. So I've got a couple of quick demos here today. I'm going to actually probably have to stoop down a little bit because the tracker is down here. And I'll just show it to you after I'm done. Okay. So I guess to best demonstrate this, I'm actually going to just put my hands up and just show you that I'm reading the text and what can be tracked, you see. Eye identification. I'm going to look over to the right. So I don't know, it seems a little weird here, like I'm an evangelist at a church or something. But
yeah, Carl, if you just put your hands behind your back, we'll believe you.
There you go. Well, I just want to make sure there's not really magic here. But it is magic. It's a little sci-fi. But the point is that I'm literally reading the text, and we know what word you're reading. So it isn't just about X, Y. It's also now about what you're doing and capturing that. So imagine that you just have an e-reader. So no more, actually, I'll cue off of Daniel's comments. We also consider this to be a form of touch, because you're actually touching the screen with your eyes. So instead of having to go reach out and do that, which is great in a lot of different environments, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you got a big monitor in front of you, and you may not want to be doing that. So we make it so you don't necessarily have to do that. I have one more demo maybe I'll show you here, which is kind of fun. And I guess I'll put my hands behind my back, but if people are familiar with the, oops. Okay, I guess the tracker is. But again, I'm not pushing any buttons. Anyhow, when the laser fires, it's just me looking at rocks, and it knows, and so forth and so on. So, okay. And this is actually what I wanted to show you is that we've been doing eye tracking for a long time, but this is the latest advancement. This is the Tobii Rex peripheral. So this is the world's first consumer peripheral powered by Tobii Gaze. So pretty small form factor. And then within a year or two, you're going to see this type of technology completely embedded into consumer electronics. So your tablet, your laptop, your all-in-one, just will have it in there. Great. Thank you.
All right. Carl, thank you so much. Quinn? So once again, gesture is becoming, I mean, just in the course of the last year, how many of you have had an opportunity to play with a Microsoft Xbox Kinect? All right. And Kinect has become a big deal in senior centers. David Dring, are you still around here? Yeah. I went to one of his senior centers where they were lined up, literally lined up on a day when it was about 105 degrees outside. Am I right, David? Yeah, and to do Kinect bowling. And it's all gesture. And it ain't just for games. And we'll let Quinn talk about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. So we started Oblong in 2006 with the goal of putting a new user interface on every screen in the world. Every computer screen of every size, every screen in your living room or in your office conference room, screens in your automobiles, and as a keynote speaker told us, screens in your appliances like your refrigerators at home. Our trajectory as a company goes from a core group of us doing work on new user interfaces, new devices, and distributed systems at the MIT Media Lab in the 90s, through doing the work for Minority Report, which was released in 2002, through selling systems that look very much like the Minority Report systems now to industrial users and now to broad market enterprise customers. And we aim towards, as I said, every computer screen in the world. Our thesis is that we've had enormous increases in the horsepower available to us, computation, in the number of pixels available to us everywhere in the world, and in the back-end processing and ubiquitous networking over the last 30 years. But our user interfaces haven't changed very much until very, very recently, as we're starting to see all of us on the panel today talking about. We've trained ourselves over the last 30 years to look at one little square of pixels when we want to work, play, or communicate. But looking at one little square of pixels is a really, really limited way of interacting with the incredible digital horsepower we have available to us. I'll just show you a little bit of video of the systems that we build and our partners build and our customers build at Oblong. The idea here is to take these little squares of pixels and unify them so that you can walk up to any screen in the world and you can point at it or talk to it or interact with another device standing in front of that screen, and you can get at all of your digital content communications channels and programs seamlessly in a multi-user, multi-screen, multi-device, gestural, and spatial fashion. Maybe I'll talk over this video. I don't have sound. So these are our original systems we started selling in 2006. You wear lightweight gloves, and you can point at any screen in the environment with you. This is today's evolution of those systems for conference rooms and meeting rooms. You can bring any device into a room, and you can share content across all screens. You saw a little glimpse of an oil reservoir engineering simulator environment in Saudi Arabia that we helped to build, and now some walk-up retail type displays. You can interact with bare hand gestures or with simple swipes and taps on phones. Here's another one of our big screen glove-based systems, and then lots of people playing a little game. And finally, if you happen to have a little helicopter around your house, you ought to be able to control that gesturally as well. A little bit of medical imaging demo. We're doing some work with General Electric in both smart grid energy management with large screen systems and surgical environments, operating rooms, so that surgeons who are scrubbed in don't have to break scrub to manipulate all the information that's available on the screens all around them. When we say multi-user, multi-screen, multi-device, we really think the future is about interacting with all of your content in all of these different ways. Gesture was where we started with the Minority Report interfaces, but we feel very strongly that building a full technology stack underneath the most capable ways of interacting with your screens you can, that brings all of your devices and all of your content together, is where we're all going.
All right. I'm excited because it means that I won't have to wear out the E key on my next keyboard, because I'll just be able to gesture at it or talk to it or blink my eyes. We're out of time, I'm afraid, but our four panelists are going to be right outside the door if you want to talk to them about the capabilities and where some of this technology is going. I, for one, am very, very excited, as I said, as someone who grew up in the 80s gesturing at my computer. This is a whole new world. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.